I'm reminded as we celebrate Black History Month, how I stand on the shoulders of Gordon Parks and Ida B. Wells in doing this work, right? Amir Locke was a 22-year-old boy. He was a law-abiding citizen. He loved music. He just registered to become a business owner. His parents helped him file paperwork so that he could legally register his company. And so he was on his way actually in just 1 week to move to Texas with his mother, where he was going to pursue his career as an artist. And what we found out that from his parents, we found out that to get by in the interim, he was working, doing DoorDash deliveries, right? Like many people. And in the city of Minneapolis, like a lot of cities across the country, there's been an uptick in violent crimes, and here specifically, a lot of violent carjacking. So Amir was inspired to go and get his license to carry so he could protect himself while he was out driving in the city doing DoorDash deliveries in case someone ever confronted him. And his parents, especially his father, talked about them having law enforcement officers within their family who trained Amir on how to properly use a gun and in what situations it was appropriate. And so he was staying the night at, I believe it was a cousin's house. And in the morning, about 6:30 in the morning, there was a raid inside of that home. He was sleeping on a couch inside of this apartment, and the couch was facing away from the door. He was sleeping with the blanket over his head when police entered without knocking. And so, we've seen 9 seconds of footage of this incident that's been released. And it's hard to say whether or not Amir really even knew who was around him because of his position facing away from the door, because he was sleeping on his stomach, because he had a blanket over his head. By the time he takes the blanket off over his head and he's able to look even in the direction of the officers, he was reaching for his gun that he legally owned. By that point, he was fatally shot by Minneapolis police officer Mark Hanneman.
My God. So I'm at once horrified just by the story itself. But the fact that all of those characteristics that you just mentioned, this young boy starting his business, moving to Texas with his mom, wants to build his career, it stands in such contrast to the way his story has been framed. So I'm going to start by thanking you for that, and for reminding the audience that the way we hear our stories, or stories about us being told from other spaces, is often not the fullness of the story. So thank you for that. When we talk about, when we hear about this case, we often talk about hear about the fact that there is this gun present. You noted that the gun was lawfully there, and because he was lawfully in possession of a gun in a home where, he is sleeping and not engaged in any illicit, illegal activity, I'm not quite even clear why it is we are having a conversation that focuses so much on the fact that a gun was present, and not you in this conversation, but generally in the conversation that surrounds this story. Do we know why the police were there? What was it that they were looking for? Clearly, they weren't looking for his gun because he owned it legally. What is it that they were looking for?
Well, yeah, and
on the basis of a no-knock warrant. I should just also add that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think it's important, as you pointed out, the way our stories are portrayed or misportrayed. Amir Locke was criminalized by local news outlets. The local police department called him a suspect, in which he was not. He was not a suspect in that no-knock warrant. There's a number of layers, even when you talk about having a no-knock warrant. The original police department that initiated that warrant was not Minneapolis. That warrant came from St. Paul, and St. Paul does not do no knocks. They sent the warrant over to MPD, who refused to execute the warrant unless they were allowed to execute it as a no knock. They insisted, and they got approval they had Judge Cahill, the same judge who presided over the Derek Chauvin case. Judge Cahill signed off on this no-knock warrant that led to the death of Amir Locke. And this is within a city where the mayor, who was just reelected in November, ran on a campaign to ban no-knock warrants in light of the policing crisis that Minneapolis has been facing over the last few years. So it's very important to talk about that no-knock warrant, because had it been executed as a regular warrant and Amir Locke had the opportunity to wake up and know who was entering that apartment, the outcome may have been very different. Had he have known that those were police officers, his parents say he would not have grabbed his gun. He would have complied. But because we saw him grab his gun and he was so distraught, he was trying to assess the situation. He was trying to assess who was there. We've had even gun experts go frame by frame of the 9-second video and show the way he was holding the gun. His finger was alongside the barrel, not on the trigger, and the gun was pointed down to the ground, not at officers, which are both indications of trigger discipline and an individual who's a responsible gun owner trying to assess the threat that's in front of them, not a person who's trying to shoot. To answer your direct question, what was the warrant for? And I think that sometimes, we want these quick answers, but it's important to have a lot of context so that we don't criminalize our Black men or dehumanize them, right?
That's right.
The no-knock warrant was for someone who I believe was related to Amir. And St. Paul police say they were looking for items that would serve as evidence in a homicide investigation. This warrant was executed across 3 different apartments. So Bolero Flats is, more than a dozen stories high in downtown Minneapolis. Police went in with keys. They had the keys to enter these apartments. They entered 1402, 1403, and 701. Nothing was found in the apartment 701 where Amir Locke was fatally shot. I believe that they did recover some items from the other 2 apartments that they were searching. But contrary to what was first reported by the Minneapolis Police Department, Amir was not a suspect. He had nothing to do with this case. And so it's very unfortunate what happened. And here we are 3 weeks later, and we have no updates on whether or not Mark Hanneman will be terminated, whether he will be charged, whether there will be any reconciliation for his loss of life.
My God. Ms. Fort, you are really helping to fill in a number of gaps in understanding about this case and about what happened. I know our time together is short today, but I do hope we can get you to come back to keep us updated. We know that there is going to be fallout from this case, quite frankly, no matter which way it goes. This investigation into this officer, is he still active? Has he been placed on desk duty? What is his status currently?
From my understanding, he's currently on paid leave. And, to your point about the fallout, the city of Minneapolis has struggled since the murder of George Floyd. And I would argue the city has struggled well before that with Jamar Clark, Philando Castile, Justine Damon, and the surrounding areas. It's not just Minneapolis, it's across the state of Minnesota. And, we just saw Kim Potter be sentenced to 2 years and probably will serve 16 months for fatally shooting Dante Wright, which reignited a lot of outrage in the local policing policies and the treatment of officers when they use fatal force. Thousands of people came out after Amir Locke was fatally shot, and the federal trial for the other 3 officers charged in the death of George Floyd is happening right now. The jury is deliberating right now. They're on day 2 of deliberations. And so all of these things are happening concurrently, right? They're all happening at the same time. And, it's hard to to say exactly, what the future holds. But there were so many promises of change after George Floyd was murdered, and not just in Minneapolis, but around the world. And I think that we have to seriously ask ourselves, those who went out and marched, the corporations that made pledges, all, the legislatures that said they were going to pass policy. I mean, I think we need an accountability check in America. Have we all played our part in being the change that we said we wanted to see? And, my opinion, if I could offer that, is that we haven't, because if we did, Amir Locke would still be alive today.
This morning, in response to someone tweeting out some news clips, headlines that a Black woman who had inadvertently voted when she was not lawfully allowed to had been sentenced to 5 years in prison. A Black woman who had registered to vote when apparently she was still finishing a term that would not allow her to, sentenced to 6 years in prison. And a white woman who declared war on America as part of the insurrection is sentenced to 45 days. And my response to that, Ms. Fort, was that it's almost as if, and I'm saying this now because it is also my response to the comment that you just made, it's almost as if the slavery system evolved and never ended. It's almost as if the same racial hierarchy that supported Black enslavement persists. It's almost as if Black people still occupy the enslaved status in this society. And I think your reporting is allowing us to see that it's not almost as if. It kind of is. I am so grateful for you, for the work that you're doing. And know, in the spirit of Ida B. Wells, we are praying safety for you as well. The same way we had to pray safety for Ida B. Wells and all of those who are speaking truth to power under extraordinarily challenging circumstances. I hope we can get you to come back, because your knowledge on this area is extraordinarily valuable, and we need to make sure our audience has access to you. How can people follow you and stay connected to the work that you're doing?
You can head over to my website, georgiafort.com. That's Fort with a T as in Tom. And all of my social media links, everything you need is right there.
That's great. Thank you so much for being with us today. Look forward to having you join us again.
Thank you. I look forward to coming back.